Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Deep Thoughts. Today, I'm going to cover John Carpenter's They Live, because I recently mentioned it in my Indoctrination Stations episode, and one of the listeners pointed out that I completely inaccurately recapped the movie, the short bit that I did recap it. And I was like, oh, man, it has been years since I've seen this film, so let me go back and check it out. I should own it anyway, and I don't own it. I didn't own it. Now I own it. And so it's important to me because that film is very important to everybody. And so misquoting, it wasn't a big misquote. It wasn't a big, I wouldn't say misquote. It wasn't a huge faux pas, but I don't know what I'm seeing in my head. There's some other movie I'm seeing in my head that I've mixed with that movie. But we're going to cover that today. But before we get into the film, just very quickly, I think it's important to recap for people who've never seen it. It's huge. It's a huge film. I actually got the year wrong, too. I thought it was released in 1985. And, when someone quotes something wrong to me and it sticks in my brain and then I hang on to that and then I say it a couple times and it's stuck in there and I'm like, son of a bitch. It was released in November of 1988, which is actually kind of interesting because I noticed in the film there is a scene that is almost identical to Total Recall, which I believe was released earlier that year. It's a big scene. We'll probably not cover that scene because it will ruin something and it's not important to what we're talking about here. But why is They Live important? It's based on a short story that another guy wrote. John Carpenter directed it, converted the short story into a screenplay, and as always, he wrote part of the soundtrack. When you listen to, and you have to understand that, like, John Carpenter created Halloween, the franchise with Michael Myers. He directed and wrote the very first one. He wrote the iconic soundtrack, and he's been back several times to direct. He did not direct the third one, which I think is a great film, but I don't think it needs to be called Halloween as a part of his franchise. I think it should have been spun off as its own film, and it's a brilliant thing all onto itself. I'm sure he was very frustrated by it, what they did to his film franchise. He's back in control of that thing now. But John Carpenter is like a very eccentric, sort of all-American guy. Supposedly a dude from my hometown writes for him from time to time, or did. I don't think they've ever made anything together, but he's claimed of being one of John's right-hand men at least one point in his life. But John brought us the Halloween franchise, which is amazing. It's just an amazing first story of that sort of type. A kid escapes from a insane asylum and comes home to terrorize the neighborhood. And then you got Friday the 13th as another spinoff copy sort of, archetype. But John also directed The Thing, which was another remake from the past, but I mean, there's no comparison between it and the remake. And it's one of these remakes where you're like, oh my God, this is really now a contender for great filmmaking. And Kurt Russell was in that too. And I believe he directed the Escape from New York's with Kurt Russell, who was also in The Thing. And so this dude has just produced some amazing films over the years, and They Live is an interesting thing because now 31 years later, it is so unbelievably, I guess you could say, predictive, prophetic. I mean, the dude is like unbelievably predicting the way that the world ended up. And of course, there's 1984, the book that's written. There's A Brave New World. There's Rollerball, 1975. So there was a lot of indicators that this was the case. And of course, he didn't write the short story. But the way that they did this was amazing. And I was told it was a remake of an old movie from the 50s or something, but there's no such thing. It's, as far as I know, it's completely original. And even if it's like lightly lifted from something else, it doesn't matter. But the movie is set in Los Angeles in the 80s. So it's probably made in 87, 88, and then releases at the end of 88. And then most of Europe, as I understand it, got it in 1989. But it's just been re-released in Europe as a fully remastered movie, which I would love to see. I met John one time, and he was not happy to meet me. He didn't know anything. He was all by himself at the E3, the big video game conference we have in Los Angeles. He was just literally all by himself at the top of a escalator. No one around him. No one recognized the guy because he's just not into that. And I walked up to him and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm a huge fan of it." And he was just like, "Okay, goodbye, see you later." Like, he was that kind of guy, right? So chalk him up to being like a cowboy who doesn't want to do the fandom thing. I should have mentioned that my buddy Sid worked with him on a Mars movie, but whatever. But John Carpenter also likes Buckethead, so I think that's super cool too, as I understand it. But They Live is about a guy whose name is Nada in the IMDb credits, Nada, but I don't think they ever say his name. But the main character is played by Roddy Piper, who was obviously a very famous wrestler at the time. And Roddy's one of these guys, it's kind of like a Hulk Hogan. He's got his own franchise, very first class, individual. He's built like a brick shit house, man. He's sadly gone now. Unfortunately, left us early. He plays opposite a guy named Frank, who's played by Keith David, who you will see in many, many films. Excellent actor, still with us, thank God. And it's about Nada. I'm just going to call it Roddy's character. Comes into town. He's kind of a drifter. He's looking for work. He gets work on a construction site where he meets Frank. And then he doesn't really have a place to stay. And so Frank's like, come with me, man. I'll take you back to my group. And again, like I said before, there's this sort of sanctuary city. It's down in LA, and they've just commandeered a field and turned it into a little city. And it's got everything. It's got showers, it's got little huts, places to live, and every single thing a homeless person would have, they have, but they've kind of built it up a little bit better. And they have a little television. And later that night, after they kind of eat and relax, they're watching television, and it's some normal thing. And then all of a sudden, someone breaks into the television signal, and a dude is like an older guy with a beard is kind of like, you've got to wake up, and we're going to stop them. And he's going through all these different things about this warning. And it's kind of breaking in and out. I'll let you watch it. But people start having like head pains, like headaches. And like, man, I'm getting kind of a headache watching this. Like, yeah, man, I'm so sick and tired of this guy interfering with our television. And they can't really understand what the hell he's talking about. And it kind of, Roddy's character sees it. Frank guy kind of doesn't really pay attention to it, as I remember. And then they just go to bed. They get up the next day. And I guess it's a weekend, as I perceive it, because I don't believe they go to work the next day. But even if they did, big deal. But the thing happens again during the day. And this particular time, it's like a father-daughter is watching this. The daughter's like a teenager. And she's like, "Oh, Daddy, I got a headache." And he's like, "Yeah, me too." Well, this dude's breaking in. But he gets a longer break this time. This guy breaking in gets a longer shot at what he's trying to say. And Roddy's kind of looking around, and there's the church, like a Spanish kind of missionary church next door. But he finds this preacher guy who seems to be blind, but he seems to be reciting. He seems to be mouthing what the guy is saying on the television, as if he knows the script. And that kind of piques Roddy's interest. Preacher gets grabbed by the guy who runs the homeless shelter. And they get him across the street, and they put him inside the church. It's broad daylight. And Roddy's watching this thing, and he's like, "Man, this is weird." And so he goes over, and at some point he goes over, and there's singing going on in the church. A little bit later on, there's singing going on in the church, and so it sounds like there's a congregation. But he kind of goes in the back door because he notices the guy from the homeless place keep going in there. And he's like, what's this guy doing going into that church over there? And how does this preacher guy know what this dude was saying on TV? And he goes in this backside door, and he kind of goes into this like little laboratory. It's got little, beakers and stuff. Not too intense. I'm proud of John not overdoing it. But he notices there's a stereo and a speaker wire that's going into the room next door. And so Roddy gets in there and he looks around the corner and he notices that the homeless shelter guy who runs the place is talking to the preacher guy, and there's other people in there, and they're going on about how they have to do better. And I think the old guy who's in the transmission's in there. So now he's like, whoa, this is really weird. So he kind of hides, and he leans against this wall, and this panel pushes in. And he's like, oh my God, and he just quickly puts the panel back. Then he comes outside and goes across, and they go through their ritual, and, at the homeless shelter. And then he convinces a guy, hey, who's got binoculars. He's like, hey, can I see those binoculars? I'll bring them right back. Yeah, sure, man. Gives him the binoculars. And so then it's a little darker now, and he's looking. And Frank comes up to him and says, what are you doing, man? He says, man, there's something weird going on over there. And Frank's whole position is, look, I got a wife and kids. I don't need any trouble. I'm just working here in the city, staying in the shelter, sending all the cash back home. Don't screw up our lives, right? Don't get us into trouble. And he's like, man, I'm just trying to find out what's going on here. He goes, plus our guy is in there. I mean, doesn't that kind of pique your interest? And he's like, no, doesn't pique my interest at all. Obviously it does. He just doesn't want any trouble. So before you know it, there's a gigantic police raid the next day, or I guess the next evening. Because before the evening concludes, they're starting to take everything out of the church. They've realized they've been compromised or something, and so they're trying to pull these boxes in this station wagon. They're trying to get everybody out of there. They're walking a priest across the street. They're doing all this other stuff, and there's a huge police raid. The helicopters come around, the ghetto birds, cops show up in tons of cars. They got them all lined up in riot gear. They're going into the church. They're raiding that, and then there's like a bulldozer situation showing up where they're starting to bulldoze the sanctuary city. And of course, Roddy's now switched into like try to save people, figure out where the hell to run himself, and he ends up running down an alleyway and finding a little building where people are hiding in. So he kind of spends the night there. Next day, the whole place is trashed, and of course they're trying to rebuild. And he sees, make sure everyone's okay, and then he goes across the street and he sneaks into the church again. And it's all been turned upside down. And he doesn't quite know what to do until he remembers, well, there was that panel that fell open in the wall. And so he pops the panel, and there's a little tiny box in there, about 10 inches by 10 inches, maybe a foot tops, and he sneaks it out, and he goes down an alleyway, and he's opening it up, and it's got a bunch of sunglasses in it. And I falsely claimed that they were Ray-Bans. It seems like the poster was made with Ray-Bans, but I don't think it is. Anyway, people have copied it with Ray-Bans. That's why they have a little tick on the end. I'm sort of a sunglass aficionado up to a certain point. I was one of the first human beings in the United States of America to wear Persals. I'll have you know that. I was working with a distributor who was working out of his apartment in Florida, like Miami or something like that, before he sold the whole license off to his Exotica. So I was living with these things for about 5 years. This is my little boast, my little brag. But anyway, it only has sunglasses in it. And so he's looking deeper and deeper in the box, like, what the hell? There must be something other secret in here, like maybe cocaine or something, right? And he's kind of pissed that he risked his life and he went through all this whole shit. And so he just goes, okay, I'm just going to take a pair of these glasses with me, leave the rest back there in the alleyway. And he starts tootling down the street. Comes out of the alleyway, turns the corner, and he just puts them on. Yeah, why not? It's sunny out. Immediately realizes the world's black and white. Takes them off. Because he's only looking at the ground at the time, and he's like, whoa. Puts them back on. And he looks down the street. And this is where we have this overlap with my my episode, Indoctrination Stations. I won't go into that whole thing, but we're going to go with what the movie actually goes with, which is with these sunglasses on, you can see that every single piece of advertisement that's been put anywhere, including magazines and newspapers and money, it's all got subliminal messages that you can't see with the naked eye unless you got these glasses on that filter the frequency. And eventually you find out, and this won't ruin anything for you at all, in fact it sets it up better, that the entire city is having a signal broadcasted at them that gets their mind not to see what they're supposed to see, what they would normally see. And so that's why everyone can't see it. But the glasses cut the frequency out and so your eyeballs can see it. And so the messages all over the place are some of them would kind of dovetail perfectly with what we have in the world today, and some of them are sort of counterintuitive to what we have today. The ones that are, I would say the only one that is sort of out of line with what we have today because they're trying to depopulate the world would be marry and procreate is one of the messages. But the big Shepherd Fairy Obey campaign with Andre the Giant as the main face of it, he picked Andre the Giant, which is interesting because you have Roddy Piper in the movie. I will accidentally say Ronnie Piper because I wasn't a big wrestling fan, but it's Roddy. Anyway, so he got that from They Live, and now it's everywhere on people's clothing, right? I mean, Obey would be the biggest globalist message you could probably come up with if you were to reduce all these things down in the movie down to one thing. That's what it would be. But they say the words submit, consume, stay asleep. It's funny because the very first shot we see him staring down the street, there's a lot of messages that don't repeat in my just watching the film. One of them is sleep 8 hours a day, work 8 hours a day, play 8 hours a day. You don't see that one again very often. But you do see, he goes to a newsstand and he's looking at magazines and it's got all the messages throughout the pages. Submit, consume, obey. And as soon as a guy walks up next to him to grab something off the magazine stand, he looks at the guy and realizes he looks like this zombie alien. It's a brilliant mix between zombification look, but also alien look. So it's not necessarily rotted. It's just the way that their skin works, which is very interesting. The guy selling the magazines is a normal human being, but the dude holding the magazine next to him, and the guy's like, "What are you looking at, man?" And he's just like, Roddy does a perfect job of like taking the glasses off, putting them on, taking them off. He's like, "Holy shit!" He's not saying anything. But the guy eventually gets in the car and takes off, and then he's obviously kind of looking like a loiter around this newsstand. So the guy who's just been paid for the magazine, the dude or newspaper, whatever it was, that drove off in the car, he's got some money in his hand. He comes up to the guy, comes up to Roddy and goes, "Man, are you going to buy that thing, or do I got to ask you to leave?" And he's like, "Oh, no, man." He puts the magazine back. His brain is totally on fire. He can't even believe what he's seeing. But he looks down at the money. And this is something I completely forgot about. The money says, "This is your God" on it. I mean, unbelievably brilliant subliminal messages plastered all over this film. So Roddy, being who he is, he's sort of a, all-American guy, and he's obviously wanting to do something about what's going on here, but this is a big deal. So he keeps walking down the street, and he kind of goes into this like Whole Foods place. Looks like the old Whole Foods places, which are teeny tiny little joints, And he's walking around. He's still looking around, He's like, "Oh my God, there's people all over the place," and he's bumping into people. And finally, this woman bumps into him, and she apologizes. And he looks over at her, and she's just one of these things. And he's like, he kind of says something like, "You're an ugly fucker, aren't you?" And she's like, "What?" And she's like, "Oh, can he see me? Can he see us?" And he keeps doing this, boom, boom, boom. And finally, she starts talking into her Rolex watch, starts reporting that they got one that can see. because they know they have a resistance. They're aware this guy's been breaking in on television, but I don't think that they were aware necessarily that there were sunglasses that were allowing people to see. And so what ends up ensuing, and this is where I'm going to start letting go of the actual specifics of the film so you can watch it and enjoy it. If they were just to release that much of the film for free, everyone would want to see this film, I'll tell you. Because it's how does it resolve? How does this work? He has, and I forgot just how long this one fight scene is between them, but when he, one of the things that you'll notice about Carpenter's films is he really likes to have fun with his films. The soundtrack that he wrote is very obvious in the film because it's very kind of campy and appropriate. It really sets, it's like some bluesy kind of synthy thing that he's put together, and it's it really works with the film. It's really cool. This guy knows the texture of his emotions perfectly, which is why he's famous at what he does, right? Love to hang with that guy for a day. I should say before I go too much further, definitely get this film. It is awesome. It rents for $4. You can buy it for $15. And it's just a great heirloom to your collection of anything you might have, even downloadable. And it's not on Netflix, so you can't get it for free because it's still good. Why give it away for free, baby? You know? But there's a point when he goes back to his friend Frank, and he's like, you got to come with me, and you got to put these glasses on, and you got to see what the hell I'm seeing. And Frank is so dedicated not to screwing up his life because he knows how it goes. Once you get involved, you can't say no. Frank's character, his buddy, is so beautifully built up because Roddy's like any one of us. Let's go. Let's get the guns. Let's blow these fuckers away. Let's get rid of the signal. Whatever you got to do to stop this thing. They don't really have a plan. But the Frank guy is like, I know I'm like you deep down inside, but I know that this is dangerous, and I don't need danger in my life. I need a construction job. I don't need the world to unravel in front of me. You know, I just need reliability because he's probably like in his early 40s or something like that, the actor, I would imagine. Can't quite tell. His wisdom throws you off for his age, so you just don't quite know. You don't know how old Keith David is. But they trying to convince his buddy to help out, and I've skipped some pretty big scenes here, so believe me, I understand I'm skipping some pretty significant things. Meg Foster's in this movie, and if there's any woman that looks like a freaking alien goddess, it's Meg Foster back in the 80s. She has the bluest eyes, like the lightest, bluest eyes you've ever seen in your life, and she, by all measurements, she is a beauty. She's in her peak at this point, but she plays the character in the film too, which I'll just let you figure out that character. But Frank doesn't want to put these glasses on. He doesn't want that change, and so they have this brawl in an alleyway. And I thought I knew how long this fight was, and so I was trying to get through the film quicker so I could kind of get to this point where I could take some notes in my brain about how to kind of describe this film. So I was sort of fast forwarding through the fight scene. Oh my God, I must have slid the playhead on a 27-inch monitor. I must have slid the playhead like an inch, and they're still fighting and fighting and fighting. It's kind of hysterical at the same time. And I think that, I don't know why Carpenter made this fight scene so long, but the only thing I would say is that it's probably an utter stroke of genius that he made this fight scene like, I don't know, 10 minutes long or something, because Roddy Piper, whatever, he's a wrestling guy, and so all of his wrestling fans are going to watch this, and so you have a 10-minute fight, of course. And it's Hollywood, which is what wrestling is up to a point, you know. And except there's no like cushy surface to be thrown down on, but you know, they're beating the living crap out of each other. And finally he wins, like Roddy wins, and he's like just stuffing these glasses on Frank's face, and he's like just holding them on his face, and he's lifting them up off the ground. He's like, you're going to come with me. We're going to walk down the street, and you're going to look at the goddamn world in these glasses, man. You're not going to run away from this. I need your help. You know, I don't even know what to do. I have no plan. Let's do this, right? And it's funny because the character, Frank, as he's being lifted up, if you watch it carefully, you can see he's being lifted up as an actor, this Keith David guy. And so he's trying to keep the glasses on his face, but like Roddy's arms are all around his head, so he's kind of like reaching up and trying to keep the glasses on his head, going for the complete opposite of what he was trying to do, never to wear these things. And of course, he sees the world and he sees it all screwed up, and we get a bunch of new messages, and as he looks around, and then the game is on. Then these guys are going to get involved and try to solve this issue. And that's sort of where I want to leave it. I would say that, and we're going to continue elaborating on the meaning of this whole thing. The ending is, I would say, victorious up to a point. And the ending, there could have been more. There could have been a sequel. That's what I think is very interesting. I almost feel like, and this has never been done in history that I know of, but I think that John Carpenter could redo this film. It doesn't really need to be redone necessarily. The only reason why you would do it on here's the thing. If John did a remake of his own movie, then he would hold up the standard that needs to be held up. It would be a shame to lose the original film in any way, shape, or form, because it's a masterpiece, of course. And I don't say you have to remake it because there's anything wrong with the original film. I just think that maybe re-releasing it here in the United States would be the trick, because I think kids need to see this. I think adults need to see this, because it's an interesting, metaphorical, fun way, if you can call it fun, to wake up, to go, okay. As the film progresses, there's a lot of dialogue about how these aliens are, well, I should say what their objectives are, what they're doing. And, I guess I can mention a few things. I don't think these will be spoilers whatsoever here. In terms of sort of what happens here, you basically find out that these aliens, and this is not a big spoiler whatsoever, they're just buying humans off. Like, there are human beings that are willing to go with them on this thing. And of course that's what can be done, because it's what humans do. They sell out, right? And so what's interesting about it is that part of the whole metaphor of this entire thing is that the aliens are obviously the ruling class of this world. And all of these subliminal messages, which are with science fiction technology of, beaming something so you can't see what you're really seeing, and that there's these aliens walking around, you can't see them unless you have these glasses on. Super cool, by the way. I mean, and what's cool about it is that John didn't take this so seriously that he really tried to make super detailed looking aliens. But I'll tell you what, whoever came up with the makeup for these things, and John obviously is there saying yes, no, I think the makeup, other than at times you can see that it's a mask that someone is wearing, the way that it moves, because he doesn't have $1 billion to make a film. Today he would, which would be interesting to see what he would do with the modern budget on this thing, because I think the thing would make a ton of cash. I just don't think anyone would allow him to make the film again, because it's too a wakey, But I think they did a brilliant job with the makeup, and then it's sort of timeless. And it's sort of funny and fun, which is like Carpenter. If you ever see all of the Escape from New York series and Escape from LA, you will see that he likes to have a lot of fun. And he kind of digs, I think, comic books and making them come real. Like Escape from LA is a comic book movie, and it's brilliantly done. And it's like Kurt Russell doesn't have to do anything in his life. He doesn't have to act in any role. But for whatever reason, he gets John's work and he agrees to it, and he makes these films. And even though you might be going, if you set your expectations wrong with Escape from LA, you might be a little bit, it's got Steve Buscemi in it. I mean, it's a really cool film, but it's comic booky. There's some scenes in there that would never be possible in real life in the slightest way, but it's so much fun the way that John directs things. So he has this magic that he does, with The Thing. If any of you haven't seen The Thing from 1981, somewhere in there, it is a masterpiece. It is a masterpiece of masterpiece. Super serious, super gruesome, even to today's standards. You know, you're going to see some visual effects that have dated just a little bit in the thing, but man, most of it is still to this day terrifying and amazing. So again, John has really been blessed at times to hit it out of the park, and They Live is no exception. But the methodology that you see with humans selling out to these aliens is that, because there's a scene that illustrates that for us, is that that's what's going on. Your Super PAC, your Pelosi's, your Schumer's, your Schiff's, your Nadlers, your Comey's, your Mueller's, your Rosensteins, all these guys, they just need a check with enough zeros on it, and they don't care about you anymore. It's all about get your own and get out, you know. It's you can't beat them, you join them, and that's why they only allow people that are easy to break into those jobs. You're already broken before you even get to that job. Now, what's interesting is, you know, the film is marching along. It marches along at a really good pace too. So, other than the 10-minute fight scene, which I guess, you know, I interpret that as a brilliantly executed exhibition piece, because you have one of the world's most, or one of the United States' most popular wrestlers is one of the main characters. It's a stroke of genius, in my opinion. So, other than that, the thing moves quick. John really likes, or at least liked, this is 30 years ago, so I can't accuse him of anything today, but he likes guns, he likes action scenes. You know, if you've ever built up any pent-up aggression that you don't have any, you know, logical means of exerting when it comes to waking up and finding out that these folks are on top of us and they've done silly things like, you know, convince everyone else that we don't own things. We don't own our land. I think that's the thing that just got to me today. Watching one of my old episodes from season 1, I was mentioning this fact, but I forgot to put like a really awesome point on it. You know, someone convinces you that you don't own what you own. You pay for it, but you don't ever own it. Royal estate, real estate, that kind of thing. You can never own the land you live on. You know, it's absurd. You have to pay property tax on your stuff. Like, you never own it. The Queen owns it. And then they convince a bunch of other people that you don't own what you own. And so you can't keep it because a bunch of morons are sitting there turning it away from your hands. And so in this world, there's a bit of that illustrated. And there's some beautiful moments of dialogue, which I absolutely cannot ruin for you, that go down the line of how man behaves and how, you know, there's a point there where one of the humans believes that this is sort of the Robin Hood algorithm and saying, well, you know, they're helping us. You know, why don't you just go with it? Why don't you just get yours? And, you know, and of course our heroes aren't shallow and they're realizing, you know, what are you, an idiot? This is not humanity and this is not it. And the one thing I will reveal, because you may miss it if you watch it, is that if you listen to every word spoken, remember this is 1988, and they had no exact idea, you know, I mean, they did at some point, but they didn't know when they were making it exactly what year it was going to come out or what month it was going to come out, but generally they knew it was going to come out in 88. But one of the lines in the script is, by 2025, these aliens said that they're going to totally control the world. If you pay attention, that's in the dialogue. It's not one of the main characters that says it. I would encourage you to get the film, however you're going to get it, and, you know, get distractions down, all right? Don't let anyone bother you while you're watching this film. If someone's pissing and moaning, tell them to go fuck off and go watch the film by yourself or whatever you got to do, because you want to sit and concentrate on what's being said, because, again, it's some of the dialogue is like a prophet speaking. And what I said when I originally talked about this in my other episode was that it has always baffled me that both the writer of the short story, which is like something like 8 o'clock in the morning or something like that, or actually let me find out what the name of that is instead of butchering it. Yeah, it's called 8 o'clock in the morning. I got to go read that short story. But it just seemed like John was so completely awake And of course, I don't know what it's like to be however old he was in '88. I don't know. And of course, he incubates it for a couple of years, of course, prior to actually being able to make the film. But the dude was awake, and I suppose this other guy was awake too. Ray Nelson is the guy that wrote the short story. I want to give out some credit there. But this is the world we live in. I mean, these are the messages that we're given. But we're also given in 2019, and obviously since 2016 presidential election, we went from, everything, and I'm just talking from America. I apologize. And again, a bunch of you guys have been commenting from Europe and around the world. And let me tell you, Australia too. We got a good following from Australia. And thank you, folks from around the world. I just can't thank you enough for continuing to watch the show. But your comments, you have to understand, when you comment about your world from outside the United States, I start salivating the second that I see over here in Australia, over here in the Netherlands or Norway or whatever. I'm just like, just trying to find as much information as possible. You guys could write 3-page comments and I'd just be reading every line of it. You have to be careful. You could probably fill me full of a bunch of crap too, and I'd believe it. But that's what's beautiful about comments, because people come in and go, no, it's not. But anyway, we had an economy that sucked. We had 48% of this country on welfare. We had this draconian existence tax called the Obamacare situation. Immigration completely fucking out of control. Our trade was out of control. Stock market's still really super wonky. 8 years after Obama gets elected, I mean, this country was really upside down, and no one was fixing shit, right? And so here comes a guy that's going to change things, for better or for worse. He's going to change things and not going to follow their diatribes. He's going to actually do something for the American people, which I think he's done. And yeah, he's got to do deals. He's got to he's got to grease both palms every once in a while, but it ain't over yet either. So, you grease for the first 4 years and then you do what you want for the next 4 years. So let's just see what happens here. But anyway, there just becomes a breaking point. And I think this movie, to finish my point I was making earlier, if you watch this film and you see the Frank and the Nada/Roddy character kick some ass, it's sort of therapeutic to watch, because you're like, yeah, go get him, man, go get him. And they'll literally, at one point, go into a room, and there's like, maybe 10%, 20% of these weirdos in there, and they're just fucking smoking these guys. And of course, no one else can see that they're just nailing just the aliens. So for them, they think they're just indiscriminately murdering human beings. And there's when Roddy first takes matters into his own hands, he does a big wave of that and ends up sort of becoming a wanted man, but it doesn't really ever materialize like a normal movie. Like, Carpenter beautifully didn't waste our time with this. Like, if you did it today and you had like a cliche writer, you would have like Roddy's face would be all over every television, and this is the most wanted man. If you see this man do this, he didn't waste your time with that crap. Roddy does what he does. He's got to lay low, but they don't waste the whole script on that. So you see this, you don't lose the script and its brilliance. So that's another just genius part of the writing, in my opinion. And there's just sometimes when directors hit a diamond, they hit it just right. And you create one of the best films that you're ever going to create, and I think that They Live has just this unique flavor to it. I would have liked to have seen this story, and I'm sure he would have liked to as well. But again, he ended it at a perfect point in the script, and I'm going to let you watch that and figure that out. Obviously, there's a limit to how much they could correct things in Los Angeles for the rest of the world. And you have no real idea about how much they proliferated the rest of the world. There's a few comments made that they're all around the world, but there's no proof that that's the case. It might have been interesting to see some kind of international television, and then you could look on the TV and you would see the other weirdos. But that's never revealed. But here we are in a world where virtually everything that's being said in this movie is now the messages that we get through subliminal social justice warrior Star Trek Discovery episodes, The new Twilight Zones, which I haven't seen, are starting to get panned because they have too much SJW juice in them. You can watch Game of Thrones and see this kind of stuff in there. I mean, anytime there's a mass audience, these controllers move in to control the scripts, to move out writers that aren't performing to the Mockingbird standards, and then all of a sudden you start getting all these kind of weird agendas. Luckily for them, there's a ton of them already embedded, right? What I think is interesting is that we're obviously a gigantic group of people are waking up, and they're waking up, we're waking up today with so many different methods. Some people go on YouTube and wake up. Some people go on Twitter and wake up. Some people are just going into public and talking to their family and their friends and waking up. Some people are just being so repressed that they are starting to wake up. And I forgot what circumstance it was. I don't know if it was fictional or real. I think I was seeing something fictional, but it was very interesting. I know I've heard it in real life as well from someone, but there was a point where, and this seems like this was a long time ago, but this is an interesting thing, and I hope not to offend anyone with telling this story, but I think it was a black guy that was saying something I saw. The gist of what he was saying was this. He says, you white folks are so easily duped into your la-la land of how the world works. And he goes, if you grew up in my era, and this guy would have been probably born in like the 50s or something, but he goes, if you grew up in my world, he goes, the cops can get really corrupt. That there's no real justice for you. The justice system can get super corrupt. The world can get corrupt. You apply for a job, you don't get it, and you're totally qualified to do it. Because he was experiencing racial, injustice in his life. And it's not that every single waking moment this guy was claiming that he was being messed with, but he just goes, you see it. You see it in your neighborhood. You see it in your own life, and it just happens. And so I thought that was interesting, that I think the guy's right. Under certain circumstances, certain groups of the world have grown up with a tougher existence. And so when someone says, hey, it's different than what you think, it ain't all bowl of cherries, bed of roses, bowl of cherries, there you go. It's easier. And I mentioned in an episode, I mentioned this several times, different episodes over the 400 shows I've done, but there's this thing where the mutts of the world, like I say, I consider myself to be sort of a quasi-mutt. I didn't grow up in any ghetto or anything. My family was definitely, I could say, at times, living with my old man, we were broke as a joke, man. Like I said, we had like $50 to last us 2 weeks, two guys. Now, luckily, we went to the PX and the, I forgot what you call the grocery store on the base, but we'd buy all of our food on a base and then take it home. So we would get what we needed for those 2 weeks, obviously more than 2 weeks worth of food, but then we'd come home, we'd only have $50. And then so you're like, my dad's got to buy gas to get to work. So, I was getting like, I got jeans and six packs, I'm not even joking, man. My dad would buy these jeans, all Wrangler jeans and and it was just hard as a rock when you put them on, It was like, I was living in Massachusetts wearing sort of like jeans that you would wear as a farm boy. It was embarrassing. So again, when I first started making my own money, clothing, it was the first thing I bought, because I was like, man, I'm not dressing like a clown anymore. I'm not dressing like some hobo anymore. But that taught me a lot about how the world worked. And moving from different towns and going to a bunch of different schools and always being the new kid in town, even if I was coming back to my hometown, I went there for a little while, but I came in and started school there, and then I left, and like, it's a bunch of shit you guys don't care about, but I left in 3rd grade, and then I came back in 8th grade. And so by the time I finished high school, I was totally into the clique of the town, and it was good. But you just end up becoming more enlightened because you see more. You see more of the craziness of it all. So some of the messages I thought were brilliant, and it sort of irks me a little bit that this Shepherd Ferry Obey brand is so huge, because The kids are now wearing this. I mean, I wear it as a joke with the zombie on the front because I'm paying homage to the They Live the movie. But this whole Shepard Fairey thing with Andre the Giant and, I don't think Andre ever, his family or his daughter, I don't think she got any money from this brand. Should have. He did the Hope poster. I mean, how classic is that? Or he brought us the president that removed all hope for his own party. But, think about some of the messages. Consume. Consume. I don't know about other countries, but America is all about consume. Consume, consume, consume. Consume food. Consume products. You need new things constantly. Otherwise, boy, you're not a success. It's like measuring yourself by how many possessions you have is just an IQ test you're failing if you're falling for that. And I want to say I've got, since I mentioned something like that in an episode, I've had some great comments where people said, you know what, I lived, because I did too. I mean, you have to understand, I'm not standing on a soapbox pointing fingers at anybody. I did it and I got out of it, Sometimes I got out of it by force, by not having a ton of money. But even when I made a ton of money last time, I kept it to myself pretty much. But guys were like, hey man, I lived the same kind of life. And then I said, screw this, I'm not doing this anymore. But honestly, go to here's what's kind of funny. If you go to your local electronics store and you price out a big giant 4K or 8K television, what are you looking at? You're looking at from between $1,500 for a big ass 4K. I mean, I'm talking probably 70 to 80 inches up to, an $8,000 television. And we kind of look at that, if you've got that kind of cash and you feel like that shit's important to you, then do it. But think about what these little cell phones cost. These fucking things are like, what, $800 to $2,000 now? People are like, oh yeah, no problem. You pay for it over 2 or 3 years of your contract. And it's like, folks, let me tell you, the amount of crap in this phone, I don't know, maybe it costs $100, Spare me all this R&D bullshit. We're way past any R&D on a phone. And they're still charging more because everybody's so damn stupid about what the materials cost inside. It does not cost that much. Even, ARM chips and all this other stuff that goes in there, all they do is they add a bed of resistors or transistors. They put a bed of, memory on, level 1, level 2 cache in there. It's just all replication of the same thing. There's nothing innovative going on. When you get a quantum computing telephone, call me and we'll talk about why it costs a lot of money, because that'll make sense. The other big message that's in there is submit. And what is the name of the game for folks that have had a great life? They're not the mutts. They lived in the same neighborhood their whole life. Their parents provided for them. They got the job. They networked because they live in that. And this is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But unfortunately, those are the folks that have the hardest time breaking out of the cycle. And there's a ton of them in my family that will die completely asleep. And just imagine, I don't know what happens here, but I had some commenter in my group that said, on like one of the, not group, in one of the videos, it was like, you need to see a psychiatrist. 9/11 was not an inside job, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, as soon as you say 9/11 is not an inside job, you're like, oh, really? Yeah, you're a genius. Unbelievable. So that is obviously what's going on. Submit to your party. You say what your political party says for you to say. It doesn't matter if you're stepping on someone else's head. It doesn't matter if you're lying. You just do whatever you can to get yours, which is a big theme in this film towards the second half. I don't know if my friend still believes this to this day, but one of my friends who I love dearly and respect dearly, I would do anything for the person, said to me, well, as long as you get yours, fuck everybody else. I'm looking at the guy going, I wouldn't be your friend if I really thought you lived like that, because here's the thing. This person's never behaved like that around me, ever. And we spent a lot of time together and we share our life together. So if we miss each other for 6 months, we recap everything. And at no point is this person stepping on anyone's head to get ahead. But he said that. Maybe it's like some Pavlovian thing that someone told him when he was young, and so he just blurts it out, or he hears it from somewhere. We can't afford to go down those roads. But the other one, which I kind of just mentioned and missed my cue, is that the money had "This is your God" on it. I mean, just think about it. You're a writer of some sort, and you're tasked. You're maybe even just John Carpenter's good friend. And this may have been in the short story. I haven't read it, so I don't know. Whoever thought up, okay, we got to write something on money that really sends the message that is the problem with, humans' perception of money today. "This is your God" is absolutely spot on perfect, isn't it? Because that's the way we perceive it. Like I said, I've got friends that are not from America, and the country that they are from, and they live in America now. They lived in America for over 35 years, but their family, because the parents are from this country, the kids can't escape that the parents only judge them to be good kids, and like literally they're not proud of their kids unless they have a monetary system to prove their success. Show mommy and daddy how much money you have. Show us how big your house is. I mean, literally, how much square footage do you have? Well, your brother's got a little bit more square footage, so he's better kid than you. He's our star kid. You're not our star kid. One of the kids is taking care of the parents. They're old, and one of them is in really bad shape. I've only heard one thing that one of these adults in that family said to the kid sacrificing his life to take care of the parents that seemed to be remotely appreciative of that sacrifice. And the other two guys are just living their lives, balling, literally fancy cars and nice houses and traveling anywhere they want to go, making $100,000 a year. Yeah. We have all extremes of the gradient of money being our God. And that's got to change. Was it Stevie Wonder in the song "I Wish"? I've mentioned this a couple times, but I just love it. He says, something like, "Back then we only worried about what we would get for Christmas." And he says sometimes we wouldn't get a thing, but it was the joy the day would bring that they ended up celebrating. If any of you read the Diary of Anne Frank, whether that's true or false, you got to see this world where they made good with what they have, and that's happened somewhere in the world multiple times, and it happens all the time in these real repressed, I wouldn't say repressed, I shouldn't use that word, but areas where poverty by any first world standard is present, and these families live in these huts and these bizarre, buildings. If you watch some of the documentaries of these kids from first worlds going into the slums of India, they've managed to really enjoy life and having less. I watched one show that was I can't remember where the heck it was. I think it was an Asian community, and it was sort of like the Slumdogs of India situation. And the documentary filmmaker, who was another, I think she was Chinese, if I remember right, or maybe she was Korean, I can't remember, but it was something on YouTube, just like one of these little documentaries someone made. And they noticed this family was really, really struggling. The father had left, and the mother was packing coal for a living, like breaking the coal up and putting it in bags, and she's covered head to toe in coal, which is obviously not good for her health. And she has tons of kids. She had probably about 5 or 6 kids. And of course, they want things that other kids have, and they're living in a kind of repressed community. So the big thing that they wanted was a TV. And so, unlike most documentaries that just film all the suffering and say, "Thanks a lot, we're going to go make a bunch of money off of you. You don't have to even sign a release form because there's no way you're going to know where this thing airs. You'll never even see it because you don't have a TV. And we're going to go make, $100,000 to $500,000 off this thing." Unlike that, okay, this host, this woman and her crew, went down to a local store in the more affluent area and bought them one of everything. Bought him a nice little TV. It was like some 20-inch television. Bought him a gaming console of some sort. I don't think it was any super name brand thing, but a few games in it, and bought him tons of food, tons of like things they really needed, but some recreational things, so the kids didn't have to, because the kids weren't coming home at a decent time because they were just down the street watching a TV over this break in the wall that, because there was no window, they just would look in at the neighbor's TV. And the funny thing was that in this community of nothing, the people with TVs knew that they were blessed to have the TV, and so they were allowing people to sit and gawk through their window. They weren't complaining that their privacy was being invaded and that sort of thing, you know. But one of the biggest messages that I want to end on is the message, stay asleep. That was everywhere. Stay asleep. And what's interesting about that is if you think about that, how do we don't really have anyone on point saying stay asleep. We've got this backhanded thing that says stay asleep. The backhanded methodology is to say, are you questioning what I'm telling you? Do you want to get kicked out of the tribe, the DNC tribe? Do you want to get kicked out of the Union tribe? Do you want to get kicked out of America? What did Bush say? It's the old saying, either you're with us or you're against us. Big passive-aggressive threat of sort of the bad nationalism. I did an episode on nationalism, and I broke it all down to the point where it's like, look, guys, nationalism, when you have do no harm, a constitution, or Magna Carta, or some derivative between those two, where, again, the common law, do no harm thing is your sort of summation. There's some tough areas in there, like to say do no harm, but you're going to have a Second Amendment. Well, the Second Amendment's because we're not completely civilized, and at least 2/3 of the world have Second Amendments, whether or not they have a constitution that says they can have them. They have no constitution that says they can't have them. And so you got to be careful. You have to defend your utopia. Biggest problem with Egypt is they didn't build a gigantic army. So when it came time to fight, they just lost because all the mutts of the world who were living in much tougher regions with they were imbalanced with nature. And so they had to fight boars and crazy predators. And so they got tough. And when they wanted to take what Egypt had, they got it. It took several phases, but they just took whatever they wanted. And so that's kind of why we have to have it. But nationalism on a Hitler level, let's just take the history book version of Hitler. And then you see Bush Jr. after 9/11, you're either with us or you're against us. Of course, we had this traumatic moment. We envisioned that supposedly all these outside forces were against us, which was, it's not like it's entirely untrue. It's just that they didn't have anything to do with that day. Sorry, lady. We're being threatened constantly to stay asleep. And if we don't stay asleep, they're going to kick you out of the club. A club you shouldn't want to be a part of no matter what. And, isn't it interesting that the party that is saying, which is sort of the 17 movement, the party that says, wake up, think for yourself, wake up, think for yourself. This is the party that the official parties, official tribes of our world write all the hit pieces about. The whole thing with the 17 movement, which is interesting, is that you have a group, whether or not it's real or not. I mean, I think today it's like so legit, it's crazy, but a group that's telling you to wake up and think for yourself is never going to be your enemy. I mean, never is that going to be your enemy. Because that is the last thing they want you to do. They want you to not think for yourself, get into doublespeak, cognitive dissidence, sort of brand loyalty, political loyalty, consumer loyalty, right, which is brand loyalty in another way. Waste all your money on this crap that you don't need, so you're always broke, you've got no retirement. And so, here's the thing. Let's review retirement for 1 second as a sort of an extension of stay asleep. Now, there are baby boomers who got in early. They did their 30 years here, 20 years there, and they've got a nest egg. They never rocked the boat, didn't have to rock the boat, and they have retirement money. Okay. Good for them. I got some of those people in my family. I'm very glad because I don't have to take care of them because they got their shit worked out. But now, our generation, Gen X and below, there's a bit of a problem. There's a challenge here. If they can keep you strung out on stuff to the point where you can never amass retirement, because one, if we lose this truth movement, if we lose the awakening, meaning lose it as a global movement, and we go back into this Macron, Trudeau, Merkel, May, Pelosi, Schumer world of they're the only rich people on the planet. They get all the best health care, all their kids' colleges are paid for. We're paying for it with our fucking tax dollars, and they get to live scot-free in every regard. They can commit crimes and never get charged because other people in the crowd will protect them. Comey protected Hillary from ever seeing a jail cell, at least during his shift. If you are broke and you are 70 years old, now there's going to be Social Security at some point. Better be if you've been paying into it your whole life. You will have to apply for aid to live. And depending on the state of your country and the state of the world, as soon as you go into their control apparatus, which is what happens. So, you're healthy when you're young. And eventually your body will give out at some point. Now, if you're lucky, you'll live a nice, rich life. You'll live into your 80s and 90s comfortably. You won't have any major setbacks health-wise. And then eventually you'll go to bed one night and you just don't wake up. That's the best way to go out, right? Natural causes. Happened all the time in my hometown when I was a kid. Never happens in my hometown today. Except for people that are whatever was before the baby boomers. Some of those people are still alive in my hometown, and they're the only ones that go out that way. All the baby boomers are dying something horrible. Always. Cancers, heart attacks, mainly cancer, of course. But they get to decide what you get. They can thin the herd simply by denying you services or putting you in some gigantic draconian line of national health care. Again, the guy from, I think it was, is it Norway? The one I mentioned recently with, Bernie Sanders is such a dumb fuck. He's keeps telling you that socialism has worked in various places of the world. And so anyway, I think he was bragging about Norway. And this guy from Norway says, look, we tried this and it doesn't work. We're not really a socialistic country anyway. And by the way, one of the biggest failures of our country is national health care. England, who's had national health care since the late 40s, is trying to pull out of it because it's atrocious. People sit in lines forever. And the thing is, what's interesting about that is that, and I hate to say this because it insults a huge group of people around the world, but there is something fucking wrong with government in general, and that they never seem to hire people who are that intelligent. They don't hire people that think for themselves because none of this stuff would be horrific, right? When I first got to California, the DMV, which is the Department of Motor Vehicles in the United States, I don't know what you call it around the world, was run horribly. I mean, you would go in there for hours and hours and hours and hours, and it was hard to get, you go in for something simple, and you're behind all these people that have major issues, and you just need to, get your picture taken for your driver's license, right? Now that's a little bit better in California. We've got some DMVs that run like Disneyland. They run tight, and it's great. But most of the time, when government gets on top of something, it's run horribly. And that's super frustrating and super scary. I mean, if we could change the system, and I don't know how you change the system, probably would have to triple the payrolls to get these people to come out of PhDs and master degrees and come and work for places. And when they see bureaucracy that's in the way of people living, of people getting things processed, permits for building, your driver's license, your registration, all that kind of stuff. And again, there's a lot of assistance in some of these areas now. But think about, I think I just mentioned this episode, so I apologize for repeating. I've had this conversation a lot recently, but the multi-billion-dollar, I think it was I didn't want to quote a number, but I think it was $7 billion website for the National Healthcare Services. It crashed on the first day it launched. I mean, it's just absurd. Someone palmed billions and built a website that probably only cost a couple tens of millions, So They Live is a masterpiece of American cinema. Again, if you're coming in with a Michael Bay brain, you'll have issues with, the special effects or whatever, but I don't think anybody on this channel is that shallow. I would never insult anybody like that. But it is a great film in that it sends a message. I think what was interesting about it, I can just tell you from being, if it came out in 88, November 88, I was 19 years old. And so I'm watching this film and in fact, I didn't see it in the theaters. I don't think I saw it in the theaters. I had to see it some other place, and I can't even remember where the hell that was. But I remember seeing it, and the world wasn't post 9/11. It was pre 9/11. And so I'm watching this, and, it's all kind of sci-fi and not interesting. But I'm sure, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that when Carpenter's making this, and when adults saw it who had been through the machine a little bit, they should have seen it and went, oh my God, that's the most profound, easy, on-point metaphor I've ever seen in my life for the way the world really works. And that's why I think you're going to really enjoy it today. And I think it's fascinating. I just was looking up on IMDb. I didn't know IMDb had release dates. Maybe it's a new feature where they actually tell you the exact region and year that this movie has released and re-released and all that kind of thing. So I saw in here, it's only May. It's the end of May. Today's May 29th, just in case you guys want to know when these things are recorded. I have an episode that's coming up that's going to be about having skin in the game. And so maybe I'll release that first or release it right after this episode. So it's kind of, Roddy Piper and Frank got their skin in the game, and they potentially sacrificed their lives to defeat these guys. It doesn't have a sad ending, trust me. But it re-released, remastered, I believe in France. Let me just make sure here. Yeah. So right here it says January 2nd, 2019, this movie was restored and re-released in France. Think about that. If you're awake, you know what that means. They just had a huge election over there, and Macron's group lost power, essentially. And I think the woman's name is Le Pen, if I got that right, the blonde-haired woman. Blonde-haired woman over there whose party just crushed the election in France. She was speaking the truth to the EU and got arrested for daring to mention how absolutely screwed up the EU is. And now her party just won. Now, they've been in riots now for 6 months straight. Those yellow vests over there, and I guess it's spreading in different parts of the world, but the yellow vests over there just got their movie on January 2nd. Imagine a yellow vest protester with all their 17 stuff all over their vests. And look up the letter 17 if you're confused by what I'm saying. But they just got the most profound reinforcement of their entire movement. They can just point at the screen and go, and because French people love films, man, like they consider themselves to be the first true artistic filmmakers. Whether that's true or not, we'll let God figure it out, right? But to have this re-release over there, I think is so unbelievably poetic in terms of timing. So very glad that happened. So I hope you guys take some time out of your life. If you haven't seen it in a long time, like me, I probably haven't seen that movie in 20 years, maybe even more. Definitely go see it. I found it to be totally enriching. I've got 2 or 3 friends lined up to watch it again with me, so I'm going to watch it 2 or 3 more times in the next 30 days, and I can't wait. I'm going to probably watch it again while I code over the next week here. But it's just worth your time. It's really brilliant, and it sends a message that's just powerful. I would be interested after you guys actually see it. If you can remember to come back to this episode's comment section on YouTube and post any epiphanies you had. For the listener that corrected me on it, now that we've opened up the can on this movie, try not to post any spoilers, or at least put that in your comment. If you read this, it's going to be a spoiler alert or whatever, because we don't want to ruin it for anybody. But what I thought was awesome, and I thought I made like a horrendous mistake. It was a total mistake about, I thought that the preacher gave Roddy Piper the box, and that was absolutely wrong. But what I find to be very, I'll put it this way, what I tremendously respected about the person's anger towards my getting this wrong was that person valued this film a lot and said, look, dude, you massacred this film. Take this down and fix it. And I was going to do it, but then I watched it and it was only like a couple minutes I got wrong. And so it was all wrong in those 2 minutes. But I thought, well, I want to take it completely down. Some of the listeners were like, don't cave into that. So this is sort of something that needed to happen anyway. I've actually had this in the back of my mind as an episode, and I just constantly forgot about it. So this event catalyzed this episode. So I'm very happy that the circumstances occurred. Just know that I'll be a little more careful in the future if I go mention films that I haven't seen in 20 years plus. I'll go and watch it, or I'll be a lot more careful about how I quote something, because I got to be careful. I don't want to be a source of disinformation. I have posted the corrections in the description of the Indoctrination Stations episode. So anyway, if you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, I made a few changes. So the navigation was starting to get a little crazy, starting going way across. I am, in the next 2 months, going to swap out the WordPress template I'm using because it's just not conducive to what we're trying to do here. So there now is a kind of a... there's hierarchical menus now for the videos, the audio. There's only one source for the video. Actually, it's not even true. We got BitChute and Brighteon. Finally got Brighteon to work. What I figured out was that Brighteon wants to be... The reason why it wasn't working is I was giving it the original 1080p 4K versions of the shows, and it doesn't want those files. They're too big. And so I started using the 720p versions on both BitChute and Brighteon, which is really the size you viewed anyway. It's perfectly fine. It's not really the resolution. It's the big deal. I'll try to get the 4K up when it comes to episode 300. So I've broke all those down. So there's the audio, has 3 links in it for the podcast, the iTunes, and the Google Play. Again, under video, it's YouTube, BitChute, and Brighteon. I have the social media links now. So there's Facebook and Twitter in their own little section. I have the link to season 1. And then I have a donate section, which has the Patreon, the PayPal, and I am supporting the Brave browser. I'm going to tell you, this Brave browser is super duper cool. I mean, I watched it on another dude's conspiracy thing, and I could tell it was a monetary thing. I don't know what you make for doing it, but I put it on my phone, put it on my laptop, put it on my desktop, and I could not be happier. The coolest thing about Brave, because again, if you watch my episode back in season 1 about how they spy on you, you were not stopping the Five Eyes from getting your information. You're not. But what you are doing is you're breaking down these corporations from being able to cross-stitch your information. Not that they technically have access to that stuff, because they technically don't. But if you hate the fact that you go to Amazon, search on Black & Decker drill, and then you come back to Facebook, and then all of a sudden your Amazon cart is in your Facebook ads. If you hate that shit, this browser cuts it off. It blocks all the trackers, which is awesome. The other thing that it does is it breaks down it stops ads from coming from ad servers. And the third thing it does, which is fantastic, it can be slightly annoying sometimes, at least on the desktop version, but it's worth it, is it keeps all those pre-run movies from happening. So when you go to Fox or some other website that's going to thrust these videos at you and you don't want to see any of that shit, you just want to read the article, and here it is streaming it. If you scroll down, it pops the video out, puts it on this little side thing, and plays it to you. It totally cuts that off. And so then you have to kind of pounce on the video a little bit to get it to play. The other link that's up there that I keep pimping out is the new season 1. I am drastically improving the editing process. If I got $1 for every time I got rid of an which I've just said a bunch of times in this video, a right, a cough, a big pause, I could buy a new house, let me tell you. So I'm stripping out all that crap, and then I'm editing it back down, boosting all the volumes. If the volumes are wonky up and down, I'm using Audition to streamline all the audio to the same volume. I'm increasing the volume louder than the music. And so this new season 1 is much more tolerable. And I just want to say, I'm going to repeat this several times because people are coming in brand new, so I apologize to the chronic listeners. Hopefully you just like the sound of my voice rambling on. The season 1 is really the advanced course, which is the basic course of this entire show. It goes at the jugular of key issues that will help your life be better. I think out of all the videos, it's probably 60% self-improvement or social issues that screw up our lives. So if you want to have a good kind of reminder course or an expanding course, which I would dare say the word enlightening course of episodes. I do apologize for being on top of the microphone. I've tried to cut a lot of the breathing, but I'm still messing up. I'll watch a video back and it's got throat clearing and all that crap. So I do apologize for that quality, but the content is pretty good. So that link is up there as well. And so BitChute and Brighteon are coming up from the season 1. Brighteon's got this weird limit. I've talked to their support staff and the Glenn guy that I think runs the place. I've asked to see if they could kind of lift my limit, but the way they work is that we have to have our first 9 videos. You have to get pounced on by viewers. Otherwise, won't let us get any more videos up there. And what they're trying to say is, if your channel's not popular, we don't want any more of your videos up there, which is sort of a shitty thing. But what the guy told me was, he goes, look, this new version is happening in June 2019. Is going to reduce our serving/hosting costs by 90%. And he goes, if that is successful, then we're just going to lift the band all together and you're going to be okay. So they're doing what they can to pull that off. BitChute doesn't have any of that. But BitChute has a weird bug that sometimes when I upload a video and commit it to be published, it never encodes and I got to kill it and re-upload it. So sometimes the BitChute episodes are out of order. I think people, if they're seeing this, they're just looking at the title and seeing if it's anything interesting to them. So if you see that kind of wonkiness in the numbering system, that's why. But there's a brand new channel on YouTube that is dedicated to Deep Thoughts Season 1. Again, it will only have Season 1 in it, but that's because I don't want to muddy up the other channel. I'm not going to be able to monetize Season 1 unless it takes off and I get a ton of subscribers, and which I probably will never get. So it's probably just going to be out there ad-free, so you guys can digest it without any interruptions. I think that's it. Go get They Live, not I Live. Go get They Live by John Carpenter, 1988. Give it a look-see and tell me what you think. If you guys know the film, and just start writing comments because I want to hear what you think. Anyway, until next time, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.